See, I'm the only guy that talks numbers. Mm-hmm. I love this. Nobody else will even talk about it. I've said it's like a crazy ant in the basement. Everybody knows she's there, but nobody talks about it.
Now, whose fault is that? Not the Democrats, not the Republicans. Somewhere out there, there's an extraterrestrial that's doing this to us, I guess. And everybody says they take responsibility. Somebody somewhere has to take responsibility for this. Now, just for the record, I don't have any spin doctors. I don't have any speech writers. Probably shows. I make those charts you see on television even. That show. Since we're dealing with voodoo economics, a great young lady from Louisiana sent me this voodoo stick, and I will use it as my pointer tonight.
Thank you, Ross Perot. And on the show today, we will be covering Ross, the great passing of the great Ross Perot, and talking about Judy Shelton, coming appointment to the Fed board, and also checking in with John Williams from Shadow Stats on today's American Confidant.
Loading the American Confidant intro.
We have $15 billion in gold in our treasury. We don't own an ounce.
And one of the problems is we don't have the gold. Other places have the gold.
It's called the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it.
The American Confidant.
Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, The American Confidant, to stay up to date with every episode. And be sure to like, comment, and share. We want to hear from you, the people. Thank you. And joining the American Confidant, I'm Jim LaFave, and I'm joined in the studio, as always, with Cash. How you doing, Cash?
I'm doing great, Jim. Thanks for asking.
Super duper.
Beautiful day today.
We'll be having a great show today. We've got John Williams that will be joining us from Shadow Stats. He's standing by. We will be covering, of course, Ross Perot and his passing. And also talking about Judy Shelton's coming appointment. First, we want to go to the news. Geneva, what do you got on the news today?
Thank you, Jim. Deutsche Bank's week from hell just got worse after reported links with Epstein and a U.S. probe into its role in the 1MDB scandal. Deutsche Bank is being investigated by the U.S. Department of Justice. The New York Times also reported that a compliance staff at the German bank raised concerns about its deals with Epstein's firm. They were quickly overruled by senior managers at the bank. These reports add to Deutsche Bank's woes this week as their share price has tanked, and the bank has just kicked off a brutal round of job cuts and restructuring. Now we have President Trump with his new nominees for the federal board. We have Judy Shelton and Christopher Waller. Waller is the current executive vice president of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. Shelton, on the other hand, is encountering some resistance as she's an unconventional choice. Her opponents have scorned her as a gold bug because her viewpoint that the dollar should be backed by gold. Also in Washington, we have a couple banks struggling. In a year where most of these 18 institutions taking their second round of Federal Reserve stress tests, most of them have showed improvements. However, JP Morgan Chase and Capital One struggled as they barely passed, with both of them forced to adjust their capital plans in order to meet central bank minimum thresholds. Ross Perot passed this week on July 9th. He was an American businessman, billionaire, and philanthropist, but he also famously ran for president in 1992. So we definitely want to send our condolences to his family. And thank you guys. Back to you in the studio.
Ross Perot. What an individual. Joining us today, we've got John Williams, Shadow Stats. John, you're on the line. How are you?
Yes, I am. Fine, thanks. How are you doing?
Oh, great to have you, John. Thanks for joining us again. Ross Perot, what do you think?
Too bad he didn't win the presidency. It would have had us in a much better condition than we are today.
You might not have had Shadow Stats, however. We understand that statistics changed just after President Clinton got elected. Isn't that correct?
Well, I've been an economist since the early 1980s. Fairly standard analysis, although I tended to give people an unbiased picture. You'll find Wall Street always tries to hype what's going on in the economy, and sometimes that's a lot of hype. But after Bill Clinton came into office, you had started to see some market shift in the way some of the key economic statistics were covered.
John, taking a look at these numbers now, just remind us again of the current unemployment rate, the current inflation rate, and the current GDP.
Well, in terms of the unemployment rate, which is probably be the closest area to a discussion with Ross Perot. The headline unemployment right now is 3.7%, just off of what was a 49-50-year low. They have a broader measure that they call U6. The headline number is U3. U6 includes some people who are considered discouraged workers today, not the way they used to be discouraged pre-NAFTA. And if you go back and reconstruct it the way it was pre-NAFTA, that'd be up around 21%.
21%. Wow. 21% unemployment.
And the inflation numbers, those were not so much tied to NAFTA as they were trying to balance the budget without having to do any real cuts in government spending. There they changed the inflation numbers to what is now 1.6% inflation. That's on a year-over-year basis. It would be roughly 9.4% if it were calculated the way it was before they started playing games. As to the GDP, right now, according to the government's numbers, the GDP is 25% above where it was at its peak activity in the fourth quarter of 2007, which was the onset of the Great Recession. The housing construction markets are down 25 to 50% from recovering the pre-recession highs.
So these are mainly financial services companies performing then in the recent markets.
Yes, and it's not Main Street USA. Mm-hmm. And the reason it's not Main Street USA is because of a lot of things that happened post the 1992 election when Perot was running. And the things that were happening, he didn't want to see happen, such as NAFTA, and such as not balancing the federal budget.
I liked what Perot said about NAFTA. If you see a snake, just kill it. Don't appoint a committee on snakes. I thought that was terrific.
John, where would you have the GDP numbers if we were using the same metrics that were in place prior to the 1992 election of Clinton? In
terms of the redefinitions, again, it would. Let me put it this way: we've never recovered from the 2007 Great Recession. In the headline GDP numbers, if they were proper, would never have recovered. And if you go back to 1992, and there are a lot of redefinitions made there where they changed some of the components, added things such as intellectual property, which is, that's an asset financially, but if you consider that a lot of the GDP growth is being created by these new movies that are being produced and then they're put in storage, so they're booked in there as inventory. That's a nice solid base to help you grow, but the average guy doesn't see the growth from it.
Right.
If you take out the gimmicks that they've added in redefinition and the inflation, you're actually seeing a year-to-year contraction of maybe 1.5%, which would be the way it was as people experienced it back in 1992.
Using those same metrics, we would actually have a negative GDP today.
That's correct.
Wow. Do you see it declining even further, John, as we progress into the new year?
Well, even as the numbers are being reported, we're right now heading into a recession. You're seeing a lot of numbers that are turning down, from production to retail sales. The consumers in serious trouble in terms of liquidity. We just saw the unemployment numbers were just published recently. What you're seeing is that real average earnings.
John, real quick, I'm sorry to break in, but we've got breaking news here on this Secure Act. This is something that Congress voted unbelievably. The Secure Act, it stands for Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement. Now, they voted in the House. This is amazing. 230 Democrats, all of them voted yes. Of the Republicans, 187 of them voted yes. Only 3 voted no. 3. And one of these guys, Cash, you knew the one.
Justin Amash. He's the turncoat. He jumped party here recently.
Going to be a big budget buster.
Yeah. They're looking to redefine retirement accounts and essentially put an end to the inherited IRA And it's an effort to try to boost the tax rolls, to give a boost to tax by limiting how long you can carry forward a retirement once you've passed it over to your beneficiaries, where everybody will have to claim the full amount within a 10-year period. So they're going to stack the payout on top of beneficiaries who are inheriting an IRA, and then that's going to compound on top of their already rising income. So it's going to add money to the coffers, but it should trim the amount of payout for the average beneficiary by about 30% because that'll be lost to tax.
Well, that's about consistent with various policies that the government's introduced in the last couple of decades. They try to mask it as best they can.
Well, you know what they've got, John? They've got 12,000 retiring baby boomers every day at 70 and a half years old taking RMDs. And right now, this is a good way to open the spigots, right? You want to go ahead and tax, they're going to put a front-end load, like if I'm passing through a retirement account to my kids, and if they could defer taxes on that account, and now they can't, when I die, they get to pay taxes on the whole thing, don't they, Cash? Isn't that what this is?
Right at their peak income earning years, they're going to be burdened with an additional tax on top of their distribution coming out of their inherited IRAs. This is just, like you said, John, this is just another way to scam the American taxpayer and dress it up as a pig with lipstick. John, anything we should be looking out for here in the upcoming weeks or in the next quarter? I know at the end of the next quarter we're expecting to see the beginnings of a major downturn here, and most forecasts are calling for 2020 to be a global recession. What's your take on the readings as you see them today?
Well, I'll contend we're already in the recession. It's not recognized yet. People are beginning to recognize that we have a problem there. I think it started in November, and I think eventually it'll be time to that. We had some real bad quality numbers on the first quarter GDP that were affected by the government shutdown. Agencies had to guess at numbers, and that eventually get cleaned up. And I think eventually you'll see the reporting in the first quarter will turn negative because they're trying to get out of the bailout of the banking system from the crash in 2007, 2008. It's not working, and because of the way they handled it, because they bailed out the banks instead of the economy. We've never seen the economy fully recover, at least as recognized by Main Street USA. The banks are okay, but if they can't get the system back to normal, we may see a perpetual state of quantitative easing. I'm not overly optimistic as to where this economy is going with the current Federal Reserve.
Do you see that they have any other way out, John? I mean, they're cutting rates. Do you see us potentially going into negative interest rates at some point following Europe's model?
Well, basically nonsensical. They should have let the banks fail. That's the problem. Had they let the banks fail, and I have nothing against the banks per se, but they were bankrupt. Have the federal government guarantee all the deposits as they did in this last crisis. They just didn't. The Fed bail out the economy. The Fed just bailed out the bank.
John, thank you for joining us. Again, ladies and gentlemen, this is John Williams, the creator at shadowstats.com. That's shadowstats.com. John, thank you so much for joining us. Will you check in? We'll have you on again with your permission, sir. You're a great addition.
Well, always a pleasure, and thank you very much for having me on.
John Williams, thank you, sir. That's such a pleasure. Boy, it's great talking with John Cash. This guy really knows his stuff.
He's on top of it. And the thing I like about John is we get the real numbers.
Mm-hmm.
You rarely get real numbers, but John is a man of integrity. He gives us the straight scoop, and we can count on it every single time. Thank you, John.
Yeah, it's funny. There was one clip that I wanted to get. Ladies and gentlemen, Ross Perot is famous for one sound. Before we go to Rick, I wanted to get his things on the trading floor over at GSI, talking about the stock market. But here's a little bit of memory lane from Ross Perot.
You can move your factory south of the border, pay $1 an hour for labor, hire a young 25. Let's assume you've been in business for a long time. You've got a mature workforce. Pay $1 an hour for your labor. Have no health care. That's the most expensive single element in making a car. Have no environmental controls, no pollution controls, and no retirement. And you don't care about anything but making money. there will be a giant sucking sound going south.
God bless Ross Perot.
That giant sucking sound.
I wish the ghost of Ross Perot would visit President Trump. Give him a little bit of, come on, baby, you can do it. And speaking of doing it, Rick, the GSI trading floor. How you doing, Rick? What's going on in the markets today?
Jim, how's it going? We're very busy here on the floor. A lot of things have happened since the Federal Reserve came out yesterday releasing the minutes. Powell decided not to reduce interest rates, as we knew it was going to happen. We knew that right now his hands are tied. He's being reactive, not proactive. And so, of course, this is going to make the president upset because the president wants, to lower interest rates in order to stimulate the economy. But instead, the president's coming up with something else, which is, I think a countermeasure to the Fed chairman, which is he wants to devalue the U.S. dollar. He wants to bring the dollar from where it's at in the dollar index at 96 down to 85, 84 basis points. Now, the market reacted today. Currently, the Dow is trading at 173 points in the positive, which isn't much, Everyone's expecting that if the interest rates would have gone down, we would have seen a 500-point move to the upside. So we're starting to see that they're losing traction. We're also starting to see inflation come in. We're seeing oil trading on the West Texas Index at around $60.38 and around $68 on the Brent. So this is something that is starting to make a toll and a move on precious metals. We're seeing gold trading today $10 down from yesterday. It's trading at $1,412.34 in the futures, which is maintaining its current path to the upside. Momentum is there. We're seeing silver trade right now at $15.21. It's down 9 cents. So we're starting to see that silver to gold ratio widen, starting to be 93 points right now. So 93 ounces of silver for 1 ounce of gold. And again, we're starting to see what the central banks are doing. They're driving the price of gold higher and higher. So we're going to see a lot of great things. We've had a lot of clients that are starting to take positions right now and take advantage of the fact that the stock market is high to move some of their profits into gold and silver. And that's what I have for today, Jim.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Rick. We'll check in. Go sell that gold.
Thanks, Rick.
Cash, what do you got on that?
I think it's wonderful. Demand is up. BlackRock just came out yesterday and said that they see a low rate on the environment overall, and so that's pushing investors out of the market into gold. We also had J.P. Morgan came out yesterday and said it's time for investors to get out of stocks.
Well, didn't J.P. Morgan just get busted with $1 billion worth of cocaine in one of their boats?
Supersized seizure. Tons of cocaine crammed into containers on a cargo ship.
15,000 kilos, that's a lot.
Clearly, they've moved out of stocks a long time ago, right?
Rick had brought up something interesting about a ratio. And right now we're looking at 92 ounces of silver to buy an ounce of gold. What do you make of that?
Jim, I'm a big gold bug. I've been buying gold for years. I like silver. I think silver had a big play when it looked like there was going to be a huge demand for silver. The yield, the gold-silver ratio was looking like it was going to contract, but currently it doesn't seem to be that way, Jim. It seems like the investors and institutional investors in particular are favoring gold. This is a war to protect currency. And right now we're seeing, this isn't speculation, this is pure currency. We know worldwide gold trades in dollars.
Well, you happen to know that I'm a big believer in silver, and I want to let my silver people know that there will be suction. And that giant sucking sound, you're going to hear silver going right past gold. But by the way, you're a big fan of Judy Shelton, Cash.
I am. And one of the reasons that I'm a big fan of Judy Shelton, and by the way, just a week ago, Judy Shelton and Christopher Waller were both nominated to the Fed. They've succeeded Stephen Moore and Herman Cain, who were also gold bugs. Judy Shelton is well known to be a gold bug. And Jim, I truly believe in my heart of hearts, and there's plenty of evidence to support it, that we will see a return to the gold standard.
I hope so.
She's a very smart woman, Dr. Judy Shelton. One of her proposals, of course, is to back treasuries with gold, and she's forecasting gold will be reset to $10,000 an ounce. And Jim, before you fall off your seat, she's not alone. We've got the CFRB, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, has also said that they are in favor of, and they've proposed proposed this to the president. And by the way, it's a bipartisan agreement that we should do a soft default of the federal budget.
Wait a minute. Hang on a second. Did you say the committee for the reform? What was
Responsible federal budget. It's a bipartisan committee.
How many are on it? 2?
No,
One and a half?
No, and there's some very prominent prominent people who've been on this committee. But
Where's their offices at? New Jersey?
No, they're in
Washington, come on, man.
But nonetheless, Jim, the proposal has been, they've suggested that we do a soft default on the federal budget.
Okay.
It would create enough pandemonium in the markets that both parties would have to agree to put us back on a gold standard. And we've got some legislation now in front of Congress. It's been renewed. It calls for the dollar to be defined by a fixed weight of gold. But we'll talk more about that later.
Oh, that'd be nice. Don't we have something on Judy Shelton? Do you have a clip? Go to clip on Judy.
How does lowering rates dovetail with your historic stance on sound money?
Well, I think what we've seen is that central banks have been engaged in policies that have created a disconnect between the real economy and the interaction between central banks and financial markets.
What's her concern, Carl?
Well, her concern is that we don't have sound money. She's a sound money advocate. Jim, she has been very, very frank, and she's got President Trump's ear. She was part of his transition team. She's a big advisor to Larry Kudlow, Steve Mnuchin, Marco Rubio.
The whole swamp.
She has the entire Republican swamp in her. She's in their ear. But, Jim, she's an advocate for the United States to stabilize the value of the dollar. She feels that we've cheated long enough by printing money out of thin air, being the world's reserve currency, and that we can actually lead the world by stabilizing our currency and backing it with gold.
Before 1913 and the Fed, we lived on tariffs. We charged the other countries for the business of doing America. And then they figured out the corporations will be the Federal Reserve, will print the cash, and will charge the citizens of America the bill.
Well, there's news out today that France is trying to charge our tech companies for sales that are made in France. And they'll just charge them at full value for whatever the sale is and call it a day. And France is saying that, well, it's fair game because if we tax profits can be hidden around the world. So the tariff war is in full bloom, Jim.
Sacre bleu.
Sacre bleu.
So we protect ourselves with gold and silver. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining the show. I want to, again, put a big shout-out to John Williams at ShadowStats for being on the show. And I encourage everyone to go on that website and become a subscriber and get that information. I want to thank Ross Perot for what he did and, maybe being the precursor to President Trump.
Ross Perot was a businessman. And, personally, I voted for Ross Perot. I've always been in favor of Ross Perot's policies. But he was an outsider, Jim, and he was a non-government entity. He wasn't part of the deep state.
God, I miss the guy that paid for his own commercial, brought a little blackboard out there in a little black suit with a real razor-sharp haircut and a bright in his eye and a swagger in his step. And he wasn't that tall, and he didn't talk right. And you know what? That guy took the heart of the Americans because he could be just like any one of us.
Well, I think he would have been president, Jim, if he wasn't pushed aside.
And Ross Perot was not a Democrat or Republican. You notice when they did that debate, when he got that Bill Clinton on one side and Big Bush on the other, I'm looking at Ross Perot behind, and I'm looking at him between these two guys, and they're looking at him. And they're looking at him like he was some... They couldn't understand him.
I thought he was an alien.
Yeah, and it's Tweedledum and Tweedledee. I realized at that point there was no difference between George Bush and Bill Clinton, and that's what Ross Perot represented, and that's why Donald Trump got elected.
Well, Jim, I believe that George Bush and Bill Clinton were two wings of the same bird.
They absolutely.
And Ross Perot was an entirely different breed. He was a man of real constitution. He was a self-made man who was born into poverty and lifted himself up by his bootstraps. A great man has passed.
Ross Perot, I want to thank you for joining the American Confidant. On behalf of myself, Jim Lefebvre, Geneva, thank you for a wonderful news broadcast. Rick, I want to thank you again if you're listening on the trading floor. Good to hear that gold and silver moving up. Cash, as always, it's great to have you. And on behalf of myself, Jim Lefebvre, thank you for joining the American Confidant. Judy's coming to the Fed. She's gonna get the gold back in our hands. Yeah.
GSI Exchange, a leading precious metals dealer helping to protect your retirement accounts and delivering precious metals straight to your door. Contact GSI Exchange at 800-474-9159 or visit them on the web at gsiexchange.com.